Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to Thursday, October 4th. So much going on in the news. I've got a very special guest today. We're going to be speaking with Mr. Brian Vukadinovich. Am I pronouncing that correctly, Brian?
Yes,
Good
perfect.
afternoon, everyone.
Whoops,
Welcome to
now
Thursday,
that's my fault.
October
Sorry,
4th.
Brian. We've been having some sound problems
going on
this
in
morning.
the news.
Where
I've
is
got
that
a
coming
very
from?
special guest
Give me
today.
just a second, Brian.
We're going to
Oh,
be
boy.
speaking with Mr. Brian Vukadinovich.
Where is that
Am I
all
pronouncing
coming
that correctly, Brian?
Yes,
Good
perfect.
afternoon, everyone.
Now, wait a
Welcome
minute.
to
Now, wait a
Thursday,
minute. I think you've
Sorry,
got
Brian.
YouTube
We've been having
open
some
on your
sound
computer,
problems in the
Brian.
news.
Brian,
I've got
quit
a
your
very
web
special
browser.
guest
Quit your
today.
web browser.
We're going to
Oh,
be
boy.
speaking with Mr. Brian Vukadinovich. Am I pronouncing that correctly, Brian?
Yes, perfect.
Now,
with the web browser, Brian. YouTube open on your computer. Brian, quit your web browser. Brian, if you can hear me, you've got to quit your... Oh, boy. Okay. We'll get Brian back in just a moment. He is new to Skype. Brian is a teacher. He's a retired teacher. Let me just send him a text message to quit your web browser. Do not have YouTube open when we talk. There we go. We'll get this worked out, Brian. Well, yes, echo, I know. Thank you, Harry. We're getting Brian acclimated to the Skype interview, and he should be back with us in just a moment. Brian was a pro se plaintiff in a civil lawsuit that he brought against the school district where he was teaching. Okay, so he's sending me a message, but I can't read it from this distance, so let's see what it says. Let's just try. Okay. Brian, you just want Skype, no web browser, okay? So let's see what it says. There's sound coming from somewhere. Do you have a web browser running on your computer? Shouldn't be,
okay. Brian, you just want Skype, no web browser, okay? So let's see what it says. There's sound coming from somewhere. I guess it must be me. Let me make sure I don't have any extraneous windows open here. There's sound coming from somewhere. Do you have a web browser running on your computer?
Shouldn't be,
okay. Brian, you just want Skype, no web browser. I mean, these are all... Okay, here it is. There's sound coming from somewhere. I guess it must be me. Let me make sure I don't have any extraneous windows open here. There's sound I've got everything muted. Do you have a web browser running on your computer?
Shouldn't be, okay.
Brian, you just want Skype, no web browser. Here it is. Coming from somewhere. I guess it must be me. Let me make sure I don't have any extraneous windows open. I've got everything muted. Do you have a web browser running on your computer? I got to figure out what's going on here. I've never seen this problem before, Brian. We've got everything set up normally here. I don't know why that's happening, my friend. The only thing I can think is that if you have YouTube open on your computer, that's going to be causing that. So make sure you have nothing running on your computer.
We've got for Skype.
Everything set up normally. I don't know why that's happening, my friend. The only thing I can think is that if you have YouTube open on your computer, that's going to be causing that. So make sure you have nothing running on your computer. We've got
for Skype.
everything set up normally. I don't know why that's happening, my friend. The only thing I can think is that if you have YouTube open on your computer. Okay, that was my fault. I apologize, Brian. I don't know how that happened. But here we are, 5 minutes into the broadcast. I'm so sorry. Okay.
Are we okay?
We're okay. Brian and I were dealing with a bunch of technical things on the lead up there, and something that's never made sound on my computer before was making sound. I've had a hectic morning, Brian. I apologize for our first interview to be presenting you so poorly. Please accept my apology, sir. I am pleased and honored.
Pleased and honored to have you with me here today. But for some reason I'm not seeing you. Let's try this once again. There we are. We've got Brian. Okay, apologies to the audience. That was crazy. The monitoring software for the stream had the audio up, which it never ever does. Brian, welcome to the show. How are you, my friend?
Thanks, Jason. I'm very happy to be here. Thanks for the invitation.
Okay, so Brian, you were a school teacher for many, many years. Tell us what happened.
Well, yes, I was a school teacher for a long time, many years back. Graduated from college in 1974. My goal, I wanted to be a successful basketball coach and teacher. Taught high school education and coached varsity basketball for many years. Coached some college basketball. That was my goal. And then along the way, I ended up, a nightmare started up for me back in 1981. Everything was going great. Teaching, coaching was going absolutely great. Everything was on course. And then me and my mother were in a bank in Valparaiso, Indiana. At the time, it was the First National Bank. We were going to do some banking. It was a Saturday morning, going to go out and do some shopping. And something very strange happened. There was some kind of a problem in the bank's parking lot, and the police were called by the bank people to investigate. And you talk about being at the wrong place at the wrong time. When me and my mother, when we went into the bank, I got mugged. I got mugged. Several cops pinned me against the wall, and so forth. And I was trying to find out what was going on, and the bank people were trying to get them off of me. My mom was trying to get them off of me. They didn't want to listen.
Wow.
So in the end, they finally figured out that I wasn't the person that they were after. So then, rather than letting me go and just simply apologizing and letting me go, they hit me with a charge and arrested me because I suppose they figured, well, we better do something here to make this look good, otherwise we're going to get in trouble.
Oh boy.
But they got in worse trouble because by charging me, we ended up, I had to defend the charges in court. So we go to court and the judge hears the case, and then he finds me not guilty, and he chastises the police, told the police that they should have apologized and just let me go, and didn't, and chastised them. The police got very angry about that. So, well, consequently, I had to pay money for a lawyer and so forth, and so I filed a lawsuit against them and got an out-of-court settlement to pay my lawyer's fees and so forth. Well, I thought, well, that would be it, and then life would go on, but it didn't. So then the exact same officer, his name was Buddy Collins out of Valparaiso Police Department, shortly thereafter, he gets me again. Pins me on his police car, on his squad car. We have words and so forth. This was in the Wiseway parking lot in Valparaiso. Fortunately for me, there was an employee at the store that saw this happening, and then he charged me with resisting arrest and all these kinds of things. And so again, we go to court. Well, they just dropped the charges. The witness came in and told the police, totally contradicted what the police said. They put me in a squad car, in the back seat of a squad car, with a police dog, with my hands handcuffed behind my back, and the dog just literally inches away from my face, growling at me.
Wow.
And this is how it was back in those days. Remember, there were no cell phones back in those days as there are now. If people would have been able to put that on their cell phones, people would have been outraged. But that's how they were doing things back then.
Now, wait a minute. I'm showing someone named Buddy Collins who's part of the North Carolina Board of Education. That's the wrong guy, huh?
Yeah, I think he's retired now. His real name is William Collins, goes by Buddy Collins.
Okay. Was he, William Collins, and what police department was he with?
The Valparaiso, Indiana Police Department. City of Valparaiso.
Valparaiso, okay. So basically this officer, he was targeting you, as a result of feeling stupid in court or something like that.
Absolutely, and in fact, he made public statements that were in the newspaper how he wasn't happy that the city settled the first false arrest case with me.
Wow.
And even the police chief made public statements about it as well. His name was Richard Buchanan, police chief at the time. They were all very upset about it, and then after that, I mean, I couldn't go to the store. I mean, I would just get in the car, I'd go to work, I would get stopped and arrested. I'd go to the grocery store, I would get stopped and arrested. Just one of many examples. One of the arrests, I was stopped. It was in October of 1986 for not having my headlights on at 4:27 p.m. in the afternoon. That was the reason they used. So then when I questioned that, and then I was swarmed, and a bunch of other Valparaiso police cars came. This was in a parking lot of a restaurant in town there. So everybody's watching this, and it looked like maybe the restaurant was getting robbed or something, and that's kind of attention it was getting. So then when I questioned it, and then, now it's resisting arrest and all these things. Well, I tape recorded them on this arrest. And we tried to play that tape, and I guess you can't hear it too well over the system here.
Yeah.
But there were a lot of things. I'm asking them on the tape, why are they arresting me and so forth? And you could hear the people. I don't know if you want me to say the exact words or not. It was pretty vulgar.
I think you should, and we should also explain that we were up to the moment that we were going live trying to capture this audio and process it in a way that would make it easier to hear, and I must have done something that caused that audio monitor to go on my computer, so that's the reason for that. But tell us what's said in the recording, and we'll work on trying to make a reduced noise capture of it.
Sure. Well, there were numerous police officers gathered, and they were all laughing. You could hear them laughing on the tape, and they were talking about something about my car. They're going to have to pay. There was a scandal in Indiana with towing services and so forth. They were talking on the tape about something about $100 being involved with impounding my car and so forth, and then this officer, Zentz was his name, who has since been arrested himself several times and pled guilty to a felony afterwards. He said on the tape, talking to the other cops and laughing, "Fuck him. I'm going to get the son of a bitch." It's clearly right on the tape. So then they exactly did that. And then what happened was they took... the charges were ultimately thrown out. I was able to prove that it was still daylight outside. I didn't have to have my headlights on. It was only 4:27 and so forth. So the judge threw the case out. And then 2 weeks later, I believe it was on November 3rd, this very same cop, Rick Zentz, then at this point now they figured out where my route was when I was going to and from work. And he actually lived on that same street on Roosevelt Road in Valparaiso. So then he gets behind me, and then stops me. I said, "Why are you stopping me?" "Well, you're speeding," and so forth. So I told him, I said, "Listen, I'm getting tired of this nonsense. I'm going home." I was only a few blocks from home. So then I went home, and then there was a bunch of police cars there, and they beat the hell out of me in my yard in front of my neighbors, in front of my mom and my brother, and then they went to Valparaiso to the same court to file the charges against me, and the Judge Billings, Bryce Billings, threw him out of his court. He told him, "Out. I'm not having any more of this nonsense." So then they filed it. They went several miles way out down the road in Portage, Indiana, and filed it in Portage. And the judge there ended up hearing the case and determined that there was no probable cause to stop me or arrest me and so forth.
Brian, let me ask you this. Can you see the photograph that I'm showing to the audience right now?
Yes.
The man standing in the doorway, I believe, is Buddy Collins, correct?
That is him, standing right in the doorway.
So he's a detective with the Valparaiso Police. He's a pretty powerful police officer, isn't he?
Yes, at the time, I think he was a sergeant. He'd been demoted for some things that he did. I do know there was a demotion.
Huh. Well, this article from January 2004 is talking about the first new police chief in 18 years. And so this is a 14-year-old picture of Buddy Collins.
Yes.
And
yes,
they
I
beat
do
you up.
recognize him. He looks a lot different, but that's definitely him.
Right. So they beat you up at your home. They're targeting you like a gang of thugs. And each of them have been involved in their own sort of legal problems, one of them having been arrested for a felony. So, okay, so you're being targeted by the police because of essentially what started as probably a case of mistaken identity. Is that what I am hearing?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
So how did this come around to a civil suit with the school board?
Well, then what happened was the police, this whole situation escalated to an extremely high level, and it was getting to the point where my name was getting pretty well known throughout. I mean, there would have been a lot of newspaper articles, Associated Press articles, and so forth. And then it became a game with the police on which one was going to be able to be the one that's going to actually be able to get me and get a conviction against me. It became a game. And then I actually got stopped one evening, not too right outside of where I live here, by a wheat field officer. He made me get in his car, and then he told me that he was watching me on behalf of the Valparaiso police. Told me that he was keeping an eye on me. And then lo and behold, about a week later, he shows up at my house in Valparaiso. I wasn't home. I was coming home from my work from teaching. And my brother told me Buddy Collins was just here with several Valparaiso cops. They have a warrant for your arrest.
Wow.
So it was just so. And then I got arrested. Their friends got me arrested in the nearby county, and then I was able to obtain letters that were written between Porter County law enforcement officials, prosecutors, the Porter County sheriff, between Porter County and LaPorte County, telling the law enforcement authorities in LaPorte County that if there needed to be any cooperation to help get a conviction against me, to let them know. So
but you haven't done anything.
I had a lot of evidence showing that there was this movement that was made between various police agencies now to get me. So there was a real major effort on it. And then I ended up, I got arrested for a charge of, I was coming home from a basketball game. It was about 10:30 in the evening. And then I got arrested for, the charge was driving while intoxicated. We go to court. Jury finds me not guilty. My jaw was broken during that arrest.
Wow.
I was required to stay in jail overnight with no medical attention and no telephone call. And then I went to court after that on the criminal charge. They tried to make a deal with me that if I didn't sue them, they would drop the charges. And I said no, I wouldn't do it. So we went to court, and then I was found not guilty. A jury found me not guilty of it. And then those same police officers from Porter County, they went to my place of employment where I taught school in Michigan City and talked to school officials over there. And then I ultimately ended up losing my job as a teacher in Michigan City over it.
So do we know what the police said to the school?
Well, the school people told me that they told the police that, I was a great person. I did a great job teaching, and they couldn't believe that, that I was out doing things that they were trying to portray me to have been doing. The school people that they talked to were very supportive of me. But they just, but it still, it leaves, it's a negative impact, and everybody sees the police come in, and then everybody starts asking questions. Why were the police here? And so forth. Now, if I could mention that after the police broke my jaw and kept me in jail with no telephone call and no medical attention, I went to the FBI and told the FBI what was going on. And I even gave them the tape recording where the police were laughing, and one of the police said, "Fuck him, I'm going to get the son of a bitch." I took all that to the FBI, and the FBI agent, his name was Dennis Heighton, he asked me if I would be willing to take a polygraph test. Mm-hmm. And I said, absolutely, I'll take one right now. So the interesting thing is, after the FBI asked me if I would be willing to take a polygraph test, they didn't give me one. And that was very strange. And then I was walking outside the FBI building with my brother, and I told him after we walked out of the building, I said, well, I don't think I'm going to get any help here because they asked me about the polygraph test and then wouldn't give me one after I said I would take it. And my feeling is that they ask that question, and then if you decline, then they write in their reports.
Yeah.
They attack your credibility then.
Right.
And then if they do give you the test and you pass the test and you show that what you're saying about the police is true, then they have a problem.
Right.
And then they can't protect the police.
Well, they could just delete the test, say you never took it, do any of the things we've learned that the FBI does.
Absolutely, very shaky. In fact, afterwards, I wrote a guest column in one of the prominent newspapers in northern Indiana, in the Post-Tribune, and I criticized the police as to what was taking place, my knowledge of what was going on, and so forth, because there had been some deaths. Some people died in that same jail where they took me, and there were a lot of questions about it, so I wrote a guest column, and then the FBI, the same agent who didn't want to give me the polygraph test, he took my public writing, my guest column, and he sent it to the Department of Justice. There was a fax that he sent with it telling the Justice Department, here's a letter to the editor that Brian Vukadinovich wrote. Well, this made me feel very uneasy because you talk about Big Brother watching. When it gets to the point that the FBI is monitoring people's free speech rights in this country, we're in big trouble. And we are in big trouble. We have been for a long time.
They're colluding with the cops. You're not the first person to come on this show and tell me about how police are arresting you wrongfully, physically injuring you. It's very, very troubling. And you know, Brian, in preparation for our interview, I've been reviewing some of the articles about you in the Post-Tribune, and of course, I was looking at your book that you wrote, which people can get from Amazon.com. I mean, the primary reason you and I are speaking today is because you've written a book called Motion for Justice, which is about your successful litigation. You acted as a pro se plaintiff in a lawsuit against the school, but you haven't sued the police. And actually, until right now, I was unaware of all this police harassment. It's certainly scary. So Motion for Justice we'll talk about in a moment. That's got to do with the lawsuit for wrongful termination from your job as a teacher. But so please carry on with the police. Where did you write that guest column? In the Chicago Tribune?
Yes, well, it was in the Gary Post-Tribune, which is a subsidiary of the Chicago Tribune. And then it was, I believe it was somewhere about 1987. I actually have a copy of it in the book as I discuss the FBI situation. So people can actually see it in the book. And then the problem that we're having, as I see it, is the corrupt. Now, I want to make one thing clear here, and I'm sure you'll agree with me. Not all police are bad, and not all police are corrupt.
Certainly.
I'm sure that the majority of the police are very good people, and they're honest, and they're trying to do a good job. However, there clearly are a lot of bad police out there, and they're unchecked. Now, there have been some movements made, and Chicago's got a big problem. In fact, right now, as we speak, the Laquan McDonald case is going on right now in Chicago with the officer who killed Laquan McDonald. That's going on right now. And fortunately, these days, and especially with the Laquan McDonald situation, there's cameras now that are catching things that are going on, where we didn't have those when all this was going on with me.
Right.
So people are becoming more aware of it now than before.
It seems strange to me, Brian. There have been so many cases where something happens with the police and then the body camera footage is mysteriously unavailable. In fact, it's happened so frequently that I've begun to believe that it can't possibly be an accident or a coincidence. I don't know if you're aware of the death of Seth Rich, the alleged death of a DNC employee who 5 Washington, D.C. Metro Police responded to the scene, and not one of their body cameras was recording. It's very strange to me.
I'm very aware of that case, and I'm aware of other cases as well. And that's totally unacceptable and inexcusable. And in my opinion, those officers should be immediately fired. Immediately. There's just, that tells it all.
It essentially demonstrates a conspiracy among the officers to suppress evidence, doesn't it?
Absolutely, no question about it. And we have mayors in cities now who are handpicking their police commissioners and allowing those type. I mean, it would seem that a mayor who picks a police commissioner, if the mayor would call that police commissioner and say, explain why your officers have been given these cameras, and yet when we have something bad happen, the cameras aren't on, explain that to me, that commissioner should be gone as well. So there's a lot of things that are taking place that it's just it's an outrage against the citizens in the country. It's been going on for a long time.
Those
and
body
I'm going to
cameras.
Tell you a segment of the system that isn't helping matters either. It's the court system. I can tell you that I went into federal court, and I had a judge. His name was James Moody in Hammond. He's still on the bench, and he refused to let me play the audio tape of the police of what they said during the arrest, because he knew that was proof of what was going on, and he wouldn't let me do it. And I can also tell you this: there was an undercover officer in the Valparaiso Police Department. His name was John Curls. He was an honest. He was like, if you remember Serpico from years back in New York,
yes,
who exposed the police corruption in the New York Police Department. He was kind of the Serpico of the Valparaiso Police Department. So he offered to go to the U.S. Attorney's office in Hammond and tell the U.S. Attorney in Hammond about the activities that were going on with the Valparaiso Police and how they were scheming to get me. And they would not even talk to him. They wouldn't take his information. That's how bad this is. It's a terrible problem across the country.
It really is.
I talk about it all in the book. It's all in there.
Yeah, and the book, of course, is Motion for Justice. I rest my case. And the book is all about this targeting and harassment that the police subjected you to, which ultimately resulted in you being fired from your teaching job. Now, so that brings me to the next part of our conversation, which is this article from the Chicago Tribune: no attorney, no problem. Wheatfield man wins suit against Hanover schools. And of course, that Wheatfield man is you. You were a pro se plaintiff. You brought the lawsuit against the school for wrongful termination. I suppose from what you're telling us that you were terminated because of something that the police told them, but of course it wasn't true. You've never committed a crime, and the initial altercation seems to be spurred by a bizarre case of mistaken identity, and then just turned into a grudge match where these police wanted to get you.
Yes, Jason, let me clarify for the record. Now, when they terminated me, it was in the Hanover Community School Corporation. I taught there for 8 years. Now, they never came out and said that it was for the police actions. They never came out and said that, although they had a lot of information in my personnel file about it.
Oh.
So they didn't say it, but I can tell you this: the lead lawyer in the case, her name was Marcia Bugala. She used to go by Marcia Volk in the past. She's the same lawyer that got me terminated from my teaching job in Michigan City for the police matters. So I won that case in arbitration, and then after telling me that I had a right to go to arbitration, I go to arbitration and I win the case, and the American Arbitration Association rules that the corporation was wrong, it shouldn't have terminated me, and ordered them to reinstate me. Then this same lawyer, Marcia Bugala, goes to court and gets it vacated, and then she ends up back on the scene against me some almost 30 years later in the Hanover case, and leads the charge for the corporation on why it was the corporation, she said, was justified in terminating me, and she lost. We went to trial, a federal jury trial, and she lost.
Wow.
So it's just mind-boggling that it's the same lawyers involved. The things that are taking place within the legal system and the judiciary is absolutely atrocious.
Yes.
But I was able to
let's
go into
focus
the
on this
trial.
attorney. Let me pause you for a
Balance
second,
the
Brian.
lawyers.
Hang on. Let me pause you for a second. So how do we spell Marcia's last name?
Bugalla.
And she's a lawyer in Indiana.
She was a lawyer with, at the time, Frost Brown Todd out of Indianapolis. It's a big law firm with firms all over the country.
Huh.
And
Why
then,
was she doing this to you?
well, many people have said after I beat her in the federal trial that she had to leave private practice because of the stain that it left on her reputation. That's what a lot of people have been saying. So now she has been hired by the Indiana Department of Education to be the general counsel for the Indiana Department of Education, which is a very sad state of affairs to have hired somebody like that to come in and give guidance to the Department of Education after she spent her career against teachers' rights in Indiana. It's just an atrocious. And I could also say another attorney in the case, his name is Thomas Wheeler. He's also a Frost Brown Todd. He was actually Trump appointed him to be the interim director of the United States Civil Rights Division.
Wow.
So he was another one of the lawyers. There were actually 5 lawyers of record in the case. Total of 7 lawyers altogether. There were two that were doing other ancillary matters. So it was very gratifying to be able to go into the trial and win the case against all of those lawyers.
But at the same time, it's very troubling to know that the police, the FBI, these attorneys, they all seem to be working together to serve grudges and vindictive attacks rather than justice.
Well, absolutely correct. And that's why we need a system put in place in this country, a system where this type of thing is monitored. As it is right now, it's an unchecked system. You go to the FBI goes to the police, and then when I received when I asked for all of the records of the investigation, essentially probably 80% of everything was blacked out. I couldn't even see what they wrote. All they did was they went and talked to other police who were actually involved in the situation. And then,
wow.
When I went to and something that also is very troubling, I received a letter from John Bolton, who is the current National Security Advisor.
Yeah.
So he sent a letter to my congressman at the time, Jim Johns, and he told Congressman Johns that a careful investigation was conducted by the FBI and the Justice Department, and they couldn't find any information, any evidence of corrupt activities by the police, which
Why
was
did
a
Bolton
total
send that?
joke.
Why did
Total
Bolton?
joke. But he didn't say anything in his letter about the tape that I provided him and a lot of other information. So everything just gets swept under the carpet.
But Brian, why did John Bolton, who's, he's an international policy, he's in the president's cabinet. Why did he get involved in your case?
Well, he was the Assistant Attorney General of the United States at the time, in charge of that department. So it ended up on his desk.
Huh.
So he had to make a determination, and so he sent a letter out. I received the letter, and then I sent 2 letters to Bolton, asking him to meet with me to explain how he could come to such a conclusion and why he chose not to discuss any of my evidence.
And what did he
So
say?
he could meet with me.
He wouldn't meet with you.
No, he wouldn't. And that's
He
the
seems
problem
like a
in the
dangerous
country. That's
guy to
what's
me,
happening.
Brian.
People just basically have no rights.
That's right. So John Bolton seems like a particularly dangerous guy to me. He's hot to start a war with Iran. He's a neocon for sure. And here you have firsthand experience where he's supporting these police grudges against citizens rather than standing up for facts and evidence and justice.
That's exactly what John Bolton is all about. He's actually, in my opinion, he's very dangerous. He's very evil. And I mean, when Trump put him on, I wasn't surprised, but very disappointed. I think the people in the country, it's a grave disservice to the people in the country.
I agree with you.
He's just not a good person.
Let me share another story with you.
All, he would have investigated that case that I brought to the Civil Rights Division, but he chose not to. He just rubber stamped the police, said it's okay. That's what these power play people do, and they don't want to be questioned.
Let me share another John Bolton story with you. Last May, I went to New Zealand and I met with someone who was on the committee, the Anti-Chemical Weapons Proliferation Committee, which is charged with studying and reducing the proliferation of chemical weapons around the world. And back in 2002, I suppose, just before the U.S. invasion of Iraq, the committee was set to release their evidence in an ongoing investigation that revealed that there were no chemical weapons in Iraq. And John Bolton went to the committee, the chairman of the committee was a Brazilian diplomat at the time, threatened the guy. This is firsthand testimony from my person I was interviewing there in New Zealand, and they destroyed the guy's life, pushed him out of the position. So John Bolton is no stranger to using false information, threats, and intimidation to get people to do whatever the hell it is that he wants.
That is exactly true. I mean, you hit the nail right on the head with that statement. That's what John Bolton's all about. I found that out personally in my own experience with him, and he's just, he'll lie. I see him on TV all the time. I know how he disregards evidence and he'll say what he wants to say to back his position up, whether it's true or false. And in most cases, what John Bolton says is false.
Wow.
And the fact that I would like to look him in the eye, even today. I would like for John Bolton to meet with me and to explain to me how he could come to a conclusion without addressing the evidence in any way, shape, or form. But John Bolton is a coward. He's a disgusting individual. John Bolton does not have the integrity or the courage to meet with me face to face so we can have a discussion about it, because he's a coward. That's what John Bolton is.
I agree with you. I think he's a dangerous man who has no place in our government and should be forced to answer for what are now numerous first-hand accounts of totally unacceptable and, from what you're saying, sounds like even illegal activity.
Well, he covers up information. What John Bolton did is tantamount to a cover-up.
Yeah.
When John Bolton had the information that I produced, that I submitted to the FBI, instead of investigating it and taking appropriate steps, he covered that information up.
Wow.
So he wasn't any better than the corrupt police in doing so. And Jason, if it's okay for me to do so here,
yeah.
I would invite John Bolton to come on your show with me, so we could have a good, healthy debate on this discussion. I would welcome that.
I wonder if we'd have the ability to do that.
We can talk about that.
I wonder if we would have the ability to do that, but I certainly would be interested in helping you. I think John Bolton has quite a bit to answer for. I am, as you are, troubled that he's a part of President Trump's cabinet, so perhaps even just making videos sharing your evidence about your experience will cause someone of importance to look into exactly what the hell John Bolton is up to. So let me take you, Brian, to the part of your misadventure where you decided to become your own lawyer. I presume all of this interaction with the police, the FBI, other lawyers would cause you to be very distrusting of lawyers in general. You could hire a lawyer who's part of their whole scheme.
Yes, absolutely. I learned long ago when all of these things were going on with the police. I mean, I had to keep hiring a lawyer one time after another after another. It was getting very costly. And then what I started realizing at the time was the politics that was in play, even with my own lawyers. I was just getting to the point where I was smelling a rat with things, and I had a lot of questions that I was asking my lawyers that they weren't willing to answer.
Wow.
And I just got real uncomfortable. And here's the bottom line. Here's what happened when I finally made the decision that I was completely through with lawyers and I was going to start representing myself. There was a time when I had 5 separate criminal cases pending against me.
Wow.
Not 5 charges, 5 actual separate cases. They were putting it all on me, thinking that I wasn't going to be able to withstand it and so forth. That was their plan.
Right.
So I did some research on my own, and I researched the law in Indiana, and there's a speedy trial rule. I'm sure that all states have it. Mm-hmm. So when I learned about that speedy trial rule, and I had all these cases pending against me, I went to my lawyer, who I was paying big money to, and I asked him. I said, "Hey, I got a question for you. Why are we allowing these cases to linger on when we have a speedy trial rule? Why aren't we having these cases dismissed? Mm-hmm. Because all they want to do is continue to prosecute me, but they're not willing to take the cases into the trial, thinking I'm going to plea bargain them and plead guilty to something that I wasn't guilty of." Right. So the lawyer said to me, "Well, it's not that easy." And I said to the lawyer, "Well, I didn't say it was easy. My question is, why aren't we filing those motions?"
Yeah.
And he wouldn't do it. So I said to him, "I expect those motions to be filed by tomorrow morning." And he said, "Well, that's not going to happen." And I said, "Well, then I'm going to file the motions." And his exact words to me were, "You're not filing a damn thing." Wow. So I fired him right on the spot, right then and there.
Yeah.
And then the next day, pro se, on my own, so people will understand what pro se is. It means representing yourself. It's a Latin term meaning for yourself, for oneself. So I filed those cases, the dismissal papers, pro se, and then the judge dismissed all of the cases against me. Now think about it. I'm paying a lawyer, and he wouldn't do it. And then when I did it on my own, the judge dismissed the cases. Now what does that tell you?
The lawyer gets paid by the hour.
Exactly. So I just decided I didn't trust lawyers. I'm sure there's some good lawyers out there, but for the most part, I'm very disappointed in the legal profession. There are good lawyers. I know you've had Elizabeth Beck and Jared Beck on your program. Excellent lawyers in Miami. Yep. Excellent lawyers. And then there's one in Ohio that's part of Judge Posner's firm, Center for Justice for Pro Se's. Right. Jonathan Zell out of Columbus, Ohio, who I talk to frequently. Excellent lawyer, helps people out. So there's good lawyers out there. But overall, the public, there's a reason that the public has such a distrust with lawyers. And I just don't think they can be trusted. If I would have had a lawyer in my case when I took the federal case on, we would have never even had a trial. In fact, the judge in the case, Chief Judge Philip Simon, he was very upset that I chose to represent myself and was trying to force a lawyer down my throat. Wow. We had several discussions over it, and I told him, no, absolutely not. I do not want a lawyer. I'm representing myself. I have the right to do so under the Judiciary Act. A lot of people don't realize, and I'm wondering if a lot of judges even realize, the Judiciary Act of 1789, which is it's a congressional law giving people the right to represent themselves in this country. And we have a serious problem with judges all across the country discriminating against pro se litigants, throwing their cases out. Pro se litigants hardly ever, it's almost zero, ever get a chance for a fair hearing or a trial in the courts in the United States. And that's a major, in fact, that's the reason that Judge Posner, who you had interviewed a few months ago, I know, actually left the Seventh Circuit in Chicago because of the abuses against pro se litigants in the Seventh Circuit. So Judge Posner is one judge that our country is deeply indebted to for what he's done.
Absolutely.
Speaking out on this problem. And
so
Judge,
I believe I'm showing...
Judge Simon there, who you have a picture of there.
Yes.
I just, as a judge, I just have, I'm disappointed in how he handled my case. He actually threatened me right before the trial. We had a settlement conference, and he relayed the message to me that the corporation wanted to pay me $150,000 to settle the case. And I said no. He got real upset about that. And I said, no, I'm going to expose these liars for the liars that they are, and we're going to go to trial. And then he said to me, and I took this as a threat, it was very inappropriate. Simon said to me, well, I don't think you're going to prevail. I don't think you're going to win. And then I said, I'm very disappointed to hear that coming from a judge. You apparently already have a preconceived notion of the outcome of this case, which is, unfortunate. And then he said to me, well, if you don't prevail, I could sanction you. It's going to cost them $75,000 to defend the trial. So I thought to myself, how does he even know that it's going to cost them $75,000? The judge should never know that. And then I said to Simon, listen, you know what you just said to me is false. The only way that a judge can sanction a litigant, the judge has to find the case to be frivolous.
Right.
And I had already beat the corporation on summary judgment, which gave me a right to a trial, and we were on our way headed into the trial, and I had to listen to that nonsense.
What did he say when you said that?
That's what's going on out there in the country. These people are wearing these black robes, and they act like they're gods, and all they are lawyers who came out of, the lawyer sector of society, politically appointed judges, who really don't have much interest in justice. I can say that with a high degree of confidence, that it's all about, let's do what we can for the government, let's do what we can for the corporations, and screw the people. That's what these federal judges basically are all about. That's what's going on in this country.
And you've just said something that really resonates with me, Brian. The judges were lawyers. So it's almost like there's this club where they don't want people like you bringing lawsuits and defending themselves in lawsuits, because the ultimate extension of that is the business of being a lawyer essentially goes away. So they're kind of protecting their circle by trying to force you to have a lawyer, by discriminating against pro se litigants, to sort of passively discourage people right on the way up to out and out threatening you. So this is very troubling information, and it's important that people know, anyone watching this broadcast should know what to expect from these judges, because no one is holding them accountable. And if no one holds them accountable, then this behavior will not change. Judge Philip P. Simon is there in Hammond, Indiana, and you can email him, and you could, I certainly don't want anyone to harass the judge, but if you are being judged by this person, you should know of this case that happened with Brian and make sure none of that is going on in your case.
Absolutely. I echo everything that you just said, Jason. Great points. What these judges want to do is they want to keep that money flowing with lawyers. And first of all, when a pro se walks in, that's one less lawyer getting paid. He actually wanted to bring a lawyer. He said, I'll get you a lawyer. And I said, no, the last thing I was going to do was get a lawyer of the judge who I already knew was hostile to my case in the first place. It was inappropriate. And let me make one other point here, Jason, if I could, on that same topic. I know of a case in Indiana, it's in the Southern District of Indiana, where a pro se is constantly getting the shaft from a federal magistrate, and constantly ruling against her. And then she found out that this magistrate and the opposing lawyer in her case were partners for 14 years.
Huh.
And the judge never disclosed that. And the judges have an obligation to disclose any possible appearance of conflict of interest.
Right.
And he didn't do that. So I advised her to file a complaint about it. She sent a complaint to Chief Judge of the Seventh Circuit, Diane Wood. Whenever you file a complaint, it has to go to the circuit that you're in. And Judge Wood, Diane Wood in the Seventh Circuit, dismissed her complaint, saying no problem.
Wow.
We have a serious problem in the country with judges. This is why lifetime federal judicial appointments is a bad idea, and it should be stopped.
I agree with that. And you know, it's very relevant with what's going on in the Supreme Court right now. I have been drawn to side with Judge Kavanaugh simply because, like you, he's been denied due process in these allegations. And the sad thing is, you know, as I speak to people who know more about Judge Kavanaugh's history as a judge, there was plenty of basis to keep him out of the Supreme Court, strictly going by his rulings and his activities as a judge. For them to bring up all these, what are now seeming to be false accusations, really took us away from the real meat of what's supposed to be being determined, and set us off on this whole Me Too movement false allegation that damages the Me Too movement, damages the ability of legitimate victims to be heard and believed and have an opportunity to come forward, and damages the whole entire process. But what you're bringing up is so relevant. There is this little club among lawyers, judges, apparently the police, certain members of the police, certain members of the FBI, that put us all in extreme jeopardy in terms of receiving due process and actually justice. So this looks to be the judge the Seventh Circuit judge who ignored that complaint, is it?
Yeah, that's her, Diane Wood.
Diane Wood.
Diane Wood tried to contradict Judge Posner's public statements about the mistreatment of pro ses, and she made a ridiculous public statement. She said that all the other judges on the circuit didn't agree with Judge Posner, but she didn't give any facts at all. If you dug into the facts that she's in a position to show, pro ses are constantly, appeals are being dismissed without review in the Seventh Circuit. I actually challenged Judge Wood to debate me on this topic, and she won't debate me. Now, why are these federal judges afraid to debate me? Why is John Bolton afraid to debate me? Why won't Judge Diane Wood? And I told her in an email that she could pick the forum as long as it was in a public forum. Let's get the facts out in her court. Let's get the numbers of all the pro se cases that are being dismissed, that aren't being adjudicated, and to the facts as to what Judge Richard Posner stated. Richard Posner, one of the most highly acclaimed federal appellate court judges in the history of the United States. And Diane Wood would take exception to that. So we're in big trouble in this country with judges like Diane Wood and just all across the board in this country.
Yeah.
Lifetime appointments should go. I question, I think we need, I don't know if you remember the Greylord sting that happened a long time ago back in the 80s in Chicago.
I don't.
It was a federal sting operation where the feds went in and they put, there was evidence of bribes being taken in cases, and they went in with microphones and so forth, and they had it was called Greylord. And then many judges in Chicago and police and court personnel ended up in prison over that. And my question is, that alone showed in the Greylord case that there are corrupt judges out there that are accepting bribes in cases. And
Right.
There is no question in my mind. The question I'll ask is, why haven't we had any Greylord stings since then?
Right.
I feel that all state and federal judges should be required to take a yearly polygraph test to show, because I have serious questions as to why so many cases, summary judgments are just rampant with cases being on behalf of corporations and government agencies, where they just almost always are receiving summary judgments and the cases are being dismissed. I have a serious question about that. I believe there's corruption going on, and I believe we need the feds to go in and start doing some sting operations on these things, because things aren't as clean as what people might think they are. They're just absolutely not. Just look at the records of the cases that are taking place.
It's amazing, Brian. You know, we hear about draining the swamp, but you're right now getting into the actual details of why the swamp is so clogged up in the first place. It seems like there are people who say, hey, you know what? Can't fight them, better join them. And instead of doing what you're doing, they just become a lawyer who looks the other way or does what the judge says. Or, you know, obviously there's varying degrees of complicity in this type of system, but you're not the first person to come onto this program and describe what is essentially an inherently corrupt judicial system. And this is so important. We're all relying, I mean, if the police can just come to your house and beat you up, this is the United States of America. I mean, we hear that that's what happens in communist China or the former Soviet Union or under the Nazis, but this is a really serious problem, and we've got to work collectively to preserve the due process of law and to make sure that judges, I mean, the people that enforce the law and carry out justice must themselves be just, you know, incorruptible, or we've got a huge problem.
And that problem is going to continue on until somebody at a high level in Congress decides that this problem needs to be investigated. The Judiciary Committee, the House and the Senate Judiciary Committee should actually have hearings on this and allow people such as myself, such as Judge Posner, to come in and testify with our information and our evidence as to what's taking place in the federal courts. I'm in a position to come in and show the House and the Senate Judiciary Committee evidence of corruption in the federal court system in northern Indiana. Without question, I'm in a position to do that. But they don't want to see my information. What they want to do is they want to squash you. They want to step on you and get you out of the way.
Yeah.
Just as the police did with me many years back when I was standing up for my rights, the judiciary does the same thing. When somebody like me comes along and makes it very clear that I'm not going to play the game that you want to play, it's wrong, it's corrupt, and we're going to deal with it, they want to squash you. Now, the question is, do we have any members of Congress, do we have any members of the Judiciary Committee that really want to do the citizens of this country justice and investigate the information that I'm in a position to show? And there are many, many others. I speak to a lot of litigants, many pro se litigants, that I have seen hard evidence of potential corruption, which leads the question, why is this all going on? Why is this taking place? I'm sure there's a lot of different reasons for that. Political reasons, friendships with judges and lawyers from when the judges were in the sector in the legal profession, when they were practicing lawyers. And yes, money. I have serious concerns about money. Insurance companies are in almost all of the cases, there's an insurance company involved. And the insurance companies have the money. Money controls things. And it's my very, very, very sound feeling that money is in play in the federal judiciary without question. Let's start taking polygraph tests of the federal judges, and let's start making the judges answer as to conversations they've had, ex parte conversations that we don't know about, and so forth, and explain why almost all of the rulings in the federal judiciary goes on behalf of corporations and government agencies as opposed to the people that are bringing the cases in their courts. It's ridiculous, it's a tragedy, and it's a crime.
Now, just so I understand you correctly, you're saying something like the school board would have insurance against getting sued. So the insurance carrier that's paying out those claims is obviously financially motivated to squash any claim against any company they insure, because any claim could set a precedent that could trigger multiple suits, multiple payouts from the insurance company. Why is that type of insurance even allowed?
Well, you would think that, just the fact that they have that kind of insurance ought to be telling you something. And those insurance companies are there to protect corruption. That's why they're there. And the corrupt people need that insurance, so they buy it, they pay the price, they buy it, and then the insurance comes into play. And then when you walk into a federal courtroom in a trial or a hearing on a case, then you got these insurance lawyers there, many of whom knew these federal judges before they became federal judges. I'm sure had dealings with them before they became federal judges. And these judges know that these insurance lawyers are calling the shots as to the money that's going to be paid out. And I do have very serious questions as to the potential of some of that insurance money being funneled into the pockets of these federal judges. I have very serious concerns about that. I honestly do. If you just look at the cases and you see how the people overwhelmingly are losing their cases on summary judgment against corporations and government agencies, that should be a red flag right there.
Yeah.
And the question is why? My answer is it's money that's in play. Let's make these federal judges take polygraph tests. Federal judges have ruled that polygraph tests are allowable in the workplace. That's been to court. I believe it's been to the Supreme Court. And so if the federal judges feel that citizens should be subjected to polygraph tests to show their honesty in the workplace, then why would federal judges have a problem with taking a polygraph test? Federal judges should be out there saying, I'll be happy to take a polygraph test, and you can ask me if I've had any ex parte conversations with insurance lawyers, and you can ask me if I've accepted any money under the table for any cases. But they won't do that.
And Brian,
I invite any federal judge to come on the record and volunteer to take a polygraph test and answer those questions.
For those watching who maybe aren't familiar with the legal terminology, an ex parte conversation is a conversation outside of the courtroom about someone related to the case. What does that mean exactly, ex parte?
It means out of the presence of the other side. It's basically a secret communication that takes place between the judge and the lawyer on the other side without your knowledge.
So that's never something that's allowed. It's obviously something screwy is going on.
It's disallowed. It's explicitly disallowed in court cases.
Right. Michael, I'm sorry, Brian, I want to speak to you about Michael Barden. I'm so glad, Brian, that you and I have met and that we're talking about all this because, as I said, I've had a number of guests who have appeared on the show who have spoken about this type of really criminal misconduct on the part of the police. One of the guests that's appeared pretty frequently with me is a guy by the name of Michael Barden. Now, Michael is what's known as a targeted individual. And I mean, again, from what you're telling me, it sounds like you were that as well. The police were having conversations about pulling you over and getting you. So, you know, this isn't imaginary. You've got them recorded saying they're going to target you. Michael Barden, who I'm showing everyone right now, has told me that he was not comfortable with his attorney and that he was being pushed towards a plea deal for a crime that he did not commit. And I gave him my personal advice that I'd be very wary of trusting a lawyer that your instincts are telling you not to trust. I know you can't give legal advice to someone you don't know and someone whose case you're not familiar with, but I found it very interesting that I offered Michael my personal advice that if he wasn't feeling right about the lawyer, he should consider defending himself pro se, just going in there and telling the truth, or getting a different lawyer. And I'm very curious to notice the people around YouTube who have specifically derided me for saying that. I think those people have a particular interest in perpetuating the injustices that you're talking about. What do you think in general about what I'm describing here with Mr. Barden?
Well, here's what I say. First of all, I agree with what you told Mr. Barden. Here's the choice a person has to make. If you feel you have a lawyer that you can't trust for whatever reason that is, and how can you possibly have confidence going into a case thinking that your own lawyer is going to do you in behind the scenes?
Right.
So the choice you have to make is: do I go in with an untrustworthy or corrupt lawyer, or do I who is going to go in and not represent me as he should, or should I just go in and speak my case and do the best that I can? It's a hard question to have to answer. I did it. It's hard to do, but I would take that option over going in with a crooked lawyer any day of the week.
Yeah.
Let the chips fall where they may, I suppose you could say. It's a bad situation either way, but if I can't trust a lawyer, if I feel he's corrupt and possibly on the take or whatever, as many of them are, I'm not going into a criminal court case with that lawyer. I'd prefer to do it myself.
Right. It's also important to take note that in Spanish, I believe the word for lawyer, and Portuguese, it's avogado, advocate. So if the lawyer is not your advocate, you should consider that very carefully. Sounds like you could have a lawyer who might even be an enemy, and you definitely don't want that. I really can't thank you enough for joining me today, Brian. I want to remind everyone that Brian has written the book, Motion for Justice, I Rest My Case, and it is a story about police harassment, wrongful termination of employment, and Michael's rise to victory as a pro se plaintiff in what many legal experts have now told us is a fundamentally corrupt justice system. And I have to say, Brian, this is a very relevant topic given what's going on with the Supreme Court today and my own personal situation where I'm being sued by individuals who I believe are corrupt and are trying to take advantage of that corrupt justice system. It permeates the civil justice system, the criminal justice system. It's a huge problem, and this is a problem that transcends midterm elections. It transcends presidential elections. This is a fundamental problem with the current state of our legal system, our judicial system here in the United States. If we're going to protect the Constitution, if we're going to protect our individual rights, we need to be certain that the police, the judges, the FBI, it cannot be a statement of, well, some of them are trying to do the right thing, or even most of them are trying to do the right thing. It needs to be an absolute rarity, to the extent that if someone in these organizations even suggests corruption, the overwhelming majority of honest individuals there would force that person out and prevent corruption, because we are all heading to hell in a rocket if this is the way it goes.
I could not have said it any better. You took the words right out of my mouth, Jason. We need people like you and others out there who are trying to do it. We need a movement on this thing. We need to be strong and stand up and address this publicly in a very loud way.
Absolutely, Brian. I'm so pleased that we've met, and I'm going to make a commitment to you right here on the show that I'd like to have you back as frequently as you'd like to return, and I'm going to help you advance this in any way that I can. I think we should try to arrange these debates with the judges that you're talking about. I will try to get John Bolton to speak on this matter, and I want to do anything I can to help you. I think this is one of the most important things we're facing.
Anytime, Jason, anytime.
Thank you for joining me this afternoon, Brian. It's been a very enlightening conversation. I hope people will buy the book, Motion for Justice, I Rest My Case, and I definitely want to thank my guest, Brian Vukadinovich. Brian, thanks for joining me. Everybody, thanks for watching. I'll be back tonight at 7 p.m. with Kevin Shipp, the intelligence assessment with Kevin Shipp, and that's going to be only on Patreon. Brian, thanks very much.
Thank you, Jason. It was my pleasure.
Have a great day.
Thank you.